One of the most important questions that you and I need to face is the question of identity. Who am I? The way we answer this question will depend on how we see the world, and each of us does need to answer it if we're going to make sense of our lives and to flourish. In Unravelling, we are exploring the way that our worldview is shaped by the stories that we tell one another, and our culture does tell us a story about identity. At its most basic, our culture says that our identity is something that we can create. You can be anything that you want to be. Let me give you an example. A number of years ago, I was listening to one of my favourite bands at the time, a band called Incubus. And I was struck by the power of music to tell this story of identity. One of Incubus's songs is called Make Yourself. Let me read you the first verse of that song. If I hadn't made me, I would have been made somehow. If I hadn't assembled myself, I'd have fallen apart by now. If I hadn't made me, I'd be more inclined to bow. Powers that be would have swallowed me up, but that's more than I can allow. According to this song, if I don't make myself, then I'm just going to be made by other people, powerful people, and that will lead to me having to bow to them or falling apart. So if this is true, then no wonder that the chorus of the song says that if you really want to live, why not try and make yourself? Now, most of you probably won't be Incubus fans, but my guess is that this story at least will be familiar to you. Don't be controlled by other people. Don't let anyone else tell you who you are or who you can be. You be you. You define yourself. You decide who you are. Express yourself. And everyone else needs to accept the way that you choose to define your identity. This story promises us freedom. It says that if we are not being controlled or coerced by anyone else, then we can truly be ourselves and that this will make us happy. And no wonder this story is popular because it sounds amazing, doesn't it? Secure identity, happiness, freedom. Which of us doesn't want these things? What could possibly go wrong? The problem is that when we take a closer look, something is going wrong, badly wrong. Reality seems very different from what we're promised by the identity story. We're facing a mental health crisis. Huge numbers of us are anxious, insecure, depressed. We've lost increasing numbers of people to suicide over recent decades, and many of us report as living without hope for the future. We're also facing a crisis in our relationships. Family breakdown is remarkably high, and record numbers of us report being isolated or lonely. For some people, the majority of their relationships are characterized by insecurity and conflict. Our politics is increasingly aggressive. Our communities are increasingly polarized. We're not treating one another very well. It's time to ask the question of whether our culture's story of identity about who we are is misleading us. When we really think about it, the claim that we can create our own identity gives us many problems. First, I have the problem of my lack of power. I may want to be a professional footballer, but unfortunately I'm not good enough. I may want to be generous, but find that my stinginess keeps getting in the way. I might want to do all kinds of things, but if it's just down to me to make myself, what if I'm not able to? Second, we might ask the question, how do I know what is really good for me? How do I know what might be worthwhile? What if I wake up, make myself a certain way, but in 30 years' time realise that I've wasted my life? After all, if I don't make a very good job of myself, then it has to be my fault. Can't be on anyone else. So the pressure's on. No wonder that we're anxious. Third, despite being told that I shouldn't let other people make myself, reality just doesn't work like that. We all need other people. No man is an island, and other people are always going to shape who I am. Part of who I am is a husband, a father, a friend, a colleague. And my identity is going to be partly formed by those relationships and the communities that I'm a part of. And if I have to deny this or see it as a threat, then that's just going to push me away from people and into isolation. Fourth and finally, if I'm making myself, then how do I know that what I make is any good? How do I know that it has value? How do I know that I'm going to be loved? What's the point of being free to make myself but end up rejected and alone? What, in the end, makes me worth something? And if it has anything to do with other people, then how on earth am I really free to make myself? In truth, the story our culture's telling us about identity is unreality. Self-made identity doesn't lead to freedom. It leads to slavery. Slavery to conflict, anxiety, insecurity, and despair. Fortunately, as Christians, we don't need to live in this story. We don't need to live in unreality. And this is because we get to ask a different question. If God is real and created all that exists, then our primary identity question changes. It's not who am I, but whose am I? You see, if we have been made by God, then we do not have to make ourselves, because He's already done that. We do not have to create our own value and meaning to desperately grasp some kind of dignity. No, we're people who have been created deliberately for a purpose, out of love. When we think about identity as Christians, it may be helpful to think about three circles. On the outside, we have the self that we present to others, the image that we present, the way we put ourselves across. Within that, we have the self that we think we are, who we understand ourselves to be. But within that, we have the self that we truly are, the self that is created by God. One of the key tasks of the human life is to increasingly discover this real created self and to live in the reality of that, to bring the outer two circles in line with the inner one. And this story of identity is one that can truly offer hope, freedom, and happiness. This story tells me that my value does not depend on my own performance or on my own ability to make myself. Therefore, I can have peace. I'm not a slave to myself and my own limitations. My identity, my dignity, purpose, and love, these are all gifts to me by the God who made me and to whom I belong. I don't have to earn them or create them for myself. This liberates me then to discover who I truly am and to partner with God in my own growth and development. And finally, this story is in line with reality. It doesn't ask me to live a lie. It doesn't contradict my experience of the world. In fact, this story makes sense of life. Two questions. Who am I? Becomes whose am I? And therein lies a world of difference.